I believe the open source software community has actually greatly enhanced the world. Okay, if you look at the internet and what we do there, without Linux and without Apache, which are two of the biggest open source projects, a lot of what we have on the internet would not exist today. But open source software, or claiming to be open source software, has been leveraged and utilized by a lot of commercial efforts. What I was talking about was basically watching what's going on in the open source software to see what kind of some of the technology underpinning trends were, which I think is a little bit different than the question that you're asking. It's not a bad thing for software to open source software to be commercialized or utilized in a commercial kind of fashion. It does hurt. It does hurt the world, okay? Because in many ways it slows down or stops the further evolution of that. But it still indicates that there's a trend and an interest there. So, one of the most famous kind of databases was known as MySQL, right? Very, very popular, very, very successful. They kind of took it commercial, okay, adding support, adding a bunch of things, but still keeping it, a piece of it open source. And I think that was actually very effective and very good. MySQL was then bought by Sun and then bought by Oracle, and I think that that's had a very different turn of events for MySQL. Fortunately, we have PostgreSQL to kind of pick up the slack. The interesting thing about it is when one of those projects gets kind of co-opted or commercialized, often a new project or an offshoot of that project will spin up in the open source community. Yeah. And so, open source isn't a cure-all. It isn't isn't everything to everybody. And for a lot of people, it doesn't work. But for a lot of stuff, it does work. But it is, I believe, very useful to watch what's going on in that world, because in the open source world, people get to work on whatever they want to work on. And people want to work on what's hot, what's exciting, what's changing, and what's new, and what's going to have impact. And so by looking at that, you can get a good insight into a lot of the trends of what's going on.